Welcome to Talmudic Treasures. Today we are learning Nazir page 48, which discusses the laws of a Nazir, in which we know that we are very strict that he is not allowed to become in contact with the dead. Now that includes not only people who are distant relatives, but even his closest relatives. In addition to that, that law applies to someone who is called a Kohen Gadol, the high priest. He may not even come in contact with his closest relatives. He may not become impure. Now that is in contrast to a regular Kohen called a Kohen Hedyot, that we do allow him to become impure to his 7 closest relatives, but not those people who are not his closest relatives. But that again is a leniency, certainly that over the high priest, in which we could understand we want the Kohen Gadol, the high priest, to remain pure. But there are exceptions for all of these people, and that is when it comes to a mace mitzvah. Namely, if they would be walking on the street and they would happen to see a dead body in which there's no one else to care for that person's remains, they themselves are obligated to take care of that actual burial. Even though, again, you may be a Nazir, you may be a Kohen Gadol, you may even be, again, a high priest, doesn't make any difference. Doesn't matter what your responsibilities are, that we need you in the temple to do the service. The reality is that there's an obligation to take care of this person who has died, and that's the most important thing to think about. Now, it's also interesting to note that the Talmud says not only the great high priest, but even a simple person who is walking down the street, but they have a mission. They're either about to have their child circumcised, which is the tradition on the 8th day. We will do a Brit Milah on our 8-day-old son. Or let's say he's about to perform the Korban Pesach. On Passover, we bring an offering, which a person will partake, which is part of the ceremony on the Passover night. And they come in contact, they are about to potentially come in contact with a dead body. So it says even those people are allowed to become impure, to become in contact with a mate mitzvah, with this body, which is fascinating. Why are they more of a chiddush? Why is it more of a novelty to think of these regular people? And on this, the Talmud explains that there's different levels of prohibition. Even though you're a high priest or a Kohen or a Nazir, the reality is if you become impure, you have violated a negative prohibition, which is bad, but it is not a very, very severe punishment. However, when a person decides not to partake of the Paschal sacrifice or circumcise their child, is actually a very severe punishment of kares, namely that person will be cut off from the community. And exactly what that means is up for discussion, not for this time, but it's a very severe punishment. And because of that, one would think, well, since it's such a severe situation, not circumcising your child, not bringing the Paschal sacrifice, the Korban Pesach, maybe you should do it and forsake the obligation of burying the dead. No, because it's no one else can do it, so you have that responsibility. So we see from here 2 very important details. First of all, no matter who you are, every person has to make sure that in a situation where there's a mace mitzvah, you have to be the one that takes care of it. It doesn't matter, again, what your role is. No matter how important you are to the community, you have an obligation to be able to take care of the dignity of that person's last moments before they're buried. You have that responsibility, which is very important to recognize, that no person should say, this is beneath me. I'm not going to do such and such a thing because I'm such a prominent and important person. No, you have to step up. And when you have a responsibility because there's no one else to do it, you need to step up and do whatever it takes. But we also see that even though we would think the high priest is the most important person, which of course in certain respects he is, but what is even more important is any person, any individual, but if they're engaged in an action which is extremely, extremely important, they are considered to be even more important than the high priest.